Hello, this is another one of my videos on an old manuscript of mine, The Universal House of Justice and the Baha'i World 1963-1973. This one dealing with the objectives of the first 9-year plan from 1964 to 1973. As with the other videos in this series, the basic source material is from Messages from the Universal House of Justice 1963 to 1986. And there's also an old article I co-wrote with Moojan Momen, The Baha'i Faith 1957-1988, which provides a sort of general context. I've divided the video up into 6 separate sections. First of all, we'll talk about the immediate objectives laid out in 1963, prior to the commencement of the new plan, when the House of Justice called upon the existing national assemblies to direct and oversee preparatory work. Then we'll move on briefly to talk about teaching and finances and the immediate goal of establishing 19 new national and regional spiritual assemblies at Reswan in 1964, and then again briefly mention of the German House of Worship, and then we'll move on to the main part of the video on the objectives and goals of the 9-year plan itself. So starting with the immediate objectives. Prior to the commencement of the new plan, the House of Justice called upon the existing national assemblies to direct and oversee preparatory work. Thus, in May 1963, immediately after its members had taken office, the House identified a number of urgent, immediate and essential tasks. These were as follows. Pioneers were to be maintained at their posts, and the national assemblies were to direct new pioneers to open unopened territories or to consolidate those which had already been opened. Secondly, all local spiritual assemblies should be strengthened through a firm establishment of Baha'i community life and an active teaching program. And thirdly, in the case of those national assemblies which were based on only a small number of local assemblies, every effort should be made to increase the number of assemblies prior to Reswan 1964. More generally, the great work of teaching had to be extended everywhere. This had reached a high intensity at the end of Sheikh Effendi's 10-year plan, leading in some instances to the beginnings of mass conversions to the Baha'i cause, and should not be allowed to slacken pace now. Rather, it should increase, particularly as all Baha'is were now able to draw on the vast spiritual powers that had been released as a result of the London Congress and the emergence of the House of Justice itself. Again, all expansion plans depended on adequate financial means, and the launching of the new plan required a constant flow of contributions to the International Fund so as to build up sufficient reserves by April 1964. To this end, the House called on every Baha'i to give attention to this vital and pressing matter, and noted the importance of the principle of universal participation, in that if every single Baha'i was able to make an offering, great or small, then they would thereby identify themselves with the work of the cause. In October 1963, the first step inaugurating the plan was announced by the House of Justice with the projected formation of 19 new national and regional spiritual assemblies at Reswan 64. These additions involved breaking up 6 of the large subcontinental assemblies that then existed in Africa, Asia and the Pacific at the end of the 10-year crusade, so that the overall number of assemblies in the world would be raised from 56 to 69. The 19 new assemblies to be formed included 9 in Africa, 3 in the Pacific, and 7 in Asia. You'll notice that many of them are still sub-regional assemblies in nature. So first of all, in Africa, Northwest Africa, West Central Africa, Uganda and Central Africa, and then actual national assemblies for Kenya and Tanganyika and Zanzibar, then also regional assemblies for South Central Africa, South and West Africa, and the Indian Ocean. In the Pacific, the Hawaiian Islands, the South Pacific Ocean, and the Southwest Pacific Ocean. And then in Asia, Northeast Asia, Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, and the Philippines. One specific need also required urgent attention. This was the as yet unfulfilled goal of the 10-year crusade to complete the Baha'i House of Worship near Frankfurt in Germany. Although the structure of the building had been completed, the interior decoration still had to be done, utilities installed, access roads laid, the grounds landscaped, and the caretaker's house built. Rapid completion of these tasks was imperative, especially as any delay was likely to add considerably to the estimated $210,000 US now required for the work. National assemblies should accordingly allocate substantial budgets so as to ensure the immediate completion of the temple. For those of you who don't know it, this is the German House of Worship after it was finished and dedicated in 1964. It was located, is still located in the village and district of Langenhain, which is quite close to Frankfurt. The overall objectives of the plan comprised the extensive expansion of the faith and universal participation by the Baha'is in the life of the faith. And the House saw all the specific goals of the plan as contributing to these two overall objectives. The plan effectively comprised two substantive sections: expansion and consolidation goals, themselves distributed amongst the now 69 national spiritual assemblies in the form of separate national plans, and Baha'i World Center goals. In addition, the House laid emphasis on a number of more qualitative goals which individual Baha'is could set themselves. There were 10 overall expansion and consolidation goals. Worldwide, the plan required the following. First, the opening of 70 virgin territories, that is, places where there had never been any Baha'is, and the resettlement of another 24. Secondly, an increase in the number of national spiritual assemblies from 69 to 108. Thirdly, an increase in the number of local spiritual assemblies to over 13,700, at least 1,700 of which were to gain legal status through some form of incorporation. And fourthly, an increase in the number of localities where Baha'is resided to over 54,000. Fifthly, the building of 2 more Baha'i houses of worship, one each in Asia and Latin America. Sixthly, the acquisition of 32 teaching institutes, 52 national Baha'i centers, 54 national endowments, that is, land held by each national assembly as a legal basis, and sites for 62 future Baha'i houses of worship. Seventhly, wide extension of civil authority recognition of Baha'i holidays and marriage certificates. Eighthly, the translation of Baha'i literature into 133 additional languages and its enrichment in the major languages in which translations had already been made. Ninthly, the establishment of 4 new Baha'i publishing trusts, and last, a vast increase in the financial resources of the faith. In terms of the role of the individual, by itself, expansion of the faith was insufficient. The healthy development of the Baha'i religion also required the involvement and dedicated effort of each individual Baha'i in terms of teaching the Baha'i faith to others, living a Baha'i life, contributing to the Baha'i Fund, and most particularly the constant endeavor to increase one's understanding of the significance of Baha'u'llah's revelation. 10 major tasks were to be accomplished at the Baha'i World Center. Firstly, Publication of a synopsis and codification of Baha'u'llah's Book of Laws, the Kitab al-Aqdas. Secondly, formulation of a constitution for the Universal House of Justice. That's a topic we've already covered in a previous video. Thirdly, development of the institution of the Hands of the Cause, so as to extend its appointed functions of protection and propagation into the future. Again, we dealt with that in the previous video. Fourthly, continued collation and classification of the Baha'i sacred writings, together with those of Sheikh Effendi. Fifthly, continued efforts to emancipate the faith from the fetters of religious orthodoxy and to gain recognition for it as an independent religion. Sixthly, preparation of a plan to develop and beautify the entire area of Baha'i property surrounding the Baha'i shrines in Haifa and Baha'i, and seventhly, extension of the existing Baha'i gardens on Mount Carmel. Eighthly, development of the relationship between the Baha'i international community and the United Nations. Ninthly, the holding of oceanic and international Baha'i conferences. And lastly, coordination of worldwide plans to commemorate the centenary of Baha'u'llah's proclamation to the kings and rulers of his day, starting in 1867-68. So that means 1967 and 1968 as the centenary. The National Spiritual Assemblies were placed in immediate control of the work as, quote, the generals of the Army of Light, under the overall guidance of the Universal House of Justice, and the Hands of the Cause were appointed as the standard bearers of this effort in what was effectively a new crusade. It was the responsibility of each of the national Baha'i communities to seize its tasks and immediately consider how best to accomplish them within the allotted years. Each needed to raise its own band of pioneers, consecrate itself to unremitting labor, and set out on its mission. The army of God, that's the term used here, would be inspired and protected by the Hands of the Cause, aided by the members of the auxiliary boards, their deputies, assistants, and advisors. It was the duty of the Baha'is to seize the opportunities of the hour. This was their golden opportunity, regardless of whatever convulsions might yet be precipitated by the waywardness of a godless and materialistic age, and however grievous might be the impact of world events on Baha'i plans and endeavors, the Baha'is should press forward, confident that all things were within God's mighty grasp, and secure in the knowledge that if they but played their part, total and unconditional victory would inevitably be theirs. Finally, we have the importance of inter-assembly collaboration projects. These are collaborations between national assemblies. A significant feature of the 9-year plan was the extent to which the House called upon national assemblies to collaborate in the accomplishment of specific goals. These included the opening and resettlement and consolidation of particular territories, the establishment of new national assemblies, the acquisition of Hazrat al-Quds, that is Baha'i administrative headquarters, temple sites, and other property goals, the translation, enrichment of Baha'i literature, and particular teaching projects. Altogether, 219 such international collaboration projects were identified, each with 2 designated assemblies, one to assume responsibility for the project and the other to assist in its accomplishment. The result was to create a web of linkages between assemblies and presumably to foster the development of a sense of international Baha'i solidarity, as well as aiding the accomplishment of particular goals. Thus, the Argentinian Baha'is were asked to assist in the acquisition of a temple site in Central Africa, as well as helping the Chilean Baha'is to open Tierra del Fuego, and the Bolivians to increase the amount of Baha'i literature in Quechua. The Hawaiian Baha'is, for their part, were asked to help with the development of Baha'i literature in 2 of the Filipino languages, and the Finnish Baha'is were directed to help in the acquisition of a teaching institute in Kenya and the consolidation of the faith in the Russian Republic. Overall, the 3 assemblies which were given the most collaborative work to do were the United States, with 26 projects, Iran were 22, and the British Isles with 17. By continent, Europe was given the largest number of assistance goals, 74, followed by the Americas, 68, Asia, 57, Australasia, 19, and Africa, just 1. So, many thanks to you for listening, and particular thanks to my patrons for their kind support and encouragement. Without them, I wouldn't be able to make these videos. You're very welcome to support my channel if you should so wish. Please do like, comment, and share on the videos. It really does help. Subscribe if you want to be notified of future videos. I'll give a Patreon link below if you want to provide practical support. Next week, we'll move on to talk about expansion in the 9-year plan. Have a good day.